Ahoj, vítejte v Praze v Malešicích. Takhle to vypadá tady, ale já vás teď vezmu do situace před třeba půl rokem, kdy se budu ocitat v Kostarice. Budu v autě s Perry Czoppem, který je spolumajitelem, spoluzakladatelem Selva Coffee, kteří nám dodávají kávu právě z Kostariky. Se svojí ženou Marianelou dali dohromady exportní společnost, která se stará o farmáře v oblasti, kde vlastně žijí. Marianely tatínek Don Carlos má farmu Don Eli, ze které vlastně máme kávu El Vapor, který v současnosti máte v nabídce. Tak ten je odsud a z téhle cesty, kterou jsem podnikl. Já se vám strašně omlouvám. Situace s nahrávacím zařízením dopadla tak, že samozřejmě tím, jak nejsem zkušený zvukař, tak tam došlo k nějakým jako rušení. Ten podcast nemá úplně krásnou až špatnou zvukovou stopu. Omlouvám se, v dalších podcastech už se to zlepší a koupím jiný mikrofony. Aspoň snad si to užijete, pusťte si to nejspíš ne úplně nahlas v sluchátkách, jsou tam nějaké jako rušení. Je mi to líto, omlouvám se, ale už to prostě nejde udělat jinak, nejsem tam a je škoda, abyste tohleto video nebo tenhle podcast si nepustili. Mějte se hezky, děkuju za pochopení.
You was living in Phoenix?
No, from Phoenix, Arizona.
And you start to competing with coffee and miraculously and happily it was from Costa Rica.
Yeah, I was roasting at the time, was interested to do barista competition, and I thought it would be a little bit different because back then most of the baristas weren't roasting yet. So I said, oh, it'd be cool if I do the presentation, I say I roasted the coffee and everything. So I was looking for a green coffee, and I had recently made a friend from Southern California that was working for an importer, and I said, hey, they gave me a spot with 2 weeks until the competition. What do you have green that I can use? He said, well, I don't really know anything about the competition, to be honest, but I have a coffee, it's from Costa Rica, it's tasting pretty good, and I can put you in touch with the farmer. And that's really what I was looking for, you know, a coffee that I can talk to the producer and know everything about the coffee, how it's processed and where it's from, all that stuff. But you have to understand, back then I didn't really know anything about origin. Okay. I didn't know, I mean, I knew it came from Costa Rica and like maybe that it came from Tarazu, but I didn't know that, you know, every country had like different growing regions and every region is unique. And definitely I didn't know Tarazu as good as I know now. But he put me in touch with Marianely, actually. And so we sent emails and I said, how did you process this coffee and where it's from? So we kind of were talking a little bit back and forth, and I went to the competition, presented it. It was my first competition, so I didn't do so well. I don't think I placed anything, and it was a regional competition, but the experience was great. Obviously, you know, I honed in my skills as a barista, and I was even doing things even beyond a barista, you know, like talking to a farmer and talking to other people in the industry, talking to my friend that was importing, and, you know, meeting other baristas and the judges. And I think competing in coffee is a great experience, even if you're not the best, you know. I think anybody can improve as a professional when you compete. And so, yeah, it was over, and kind of I had Nella's contact and Carlos's contact, and I wanted to continue competing and getting to know that farm more, because it was really the only contact I had for a producer. And yeah, they invited me to come check it out. And so a few months went by and things in my life were changing. I wanted something different than the roastery that I was working at, and yeah, just a little change in my life. I was able to save some money. I was living with my parents. I decided I would come to Costa Rica for a month or two during the harvest.
Okay.
And so I came down here, and Nella was actually not here. She was in Australia, working with the roaster in Australia. And so it was just me, Carlos, Lucia, Jacob, Maria Jose. And it was only like the second year that they were processing their own coffee.
Okay.
Marianely was brand new. So it looks similar to how it looks now, but little differences.
Yeah.
And so Carlos took me to a very special finca inside Tematica, which is called the Chamaco farm, which he bought from a guy named Chamaco, and this guy didn't really touch it. Like, all the plants that were there were planted almost 100 years ago. You know, they're típica varieties, which they used to grow a lot here, or what they call Arabigo in Costa Rica. And yeah, like, kind of forest grown, like a lot of shade, a lot of trees, and kind of like a low intervention coffee farm. And so he put me there for a few days to pick the coffee, and man, it was tough. Picking coffee is really, really hard work. Especially these típicas, because they're so tall.
Okay.
And you have to like hold down the tree with one hand and pick with another hand, so it's very slow, and it was tough work, and I wasn't very good at it, to be honest. Especially because, you know, I'm like a barista, like a third wave specialty barista, so I came and I'm like, oh, I can only take like the perfect cherry, right? So it was definitely an experience. And then after I picked it, I did a few different processing methods. We did washed, honey, natural, and again, it was a huge learning experience, like how much work goes into processing, and especially learning how to process, because there's no book out there that tells you how to do things. And if you don't have a system, if you're not set up, there's a really big learning curve. So, you know, you're moving around all the coffee and putting it in water and taking it out of water, or pulping it, and everything was just very difficult. You know, it sounds like easy. Oh, you pulp it, you dry it, but each one of those steps is a lot of work. And so after a month or two, we had the coffees ready, and Carlos took me all around Tarazu to see who would dry mill it for me. And so then I'm starting also to learn a little bit about dry milling, which, by the way, I think is a big step in the coffee chain that nobody's really talking about right now. I feel like people are still kind of focused in varieties and processing methods and things of that nature, but export preparation is like, I think, the next big talking point. And yeah, so we got the coffees ready, and I had like 3 different coffees, everything together maybe made like 46 kilograms, and I took it back with me in my suitcase to the United States to compete again the next year. And
it was quite pounds.
Yeah, it was 100 pounds I somehow smuggled into the United States in the plane. So yeah, so I had that coffee, and of course Nella and I stayed in touch. She was coming back from Australia, and she was going to visit the United States kind of on her way back home, and she was going to spend time with this friend that I made, the importer that sold me the one bag from Costa Rica like the year before. And so she was doing like a little internship at that importing business in California, and that guy had to buy coffees again for the importer from Costa Rica, so he came down to Costa Rica, and he didn't really know what to do with Nella, was gone. And so, I don't know, between the three of us, we decided, and I felt like I kind of owed the family something because I spent, 2 months with them during the harvest. So I said, yeah, I'll take Nella, she can stay with me and my family, and I'll show her all the coffee shops and roasters and everything that's happening in Arizona. So she came for a couple weeks, and we're just hanging out, coffee. And yeah, that was it. She went back to California. I think we saw each other again in Seattle for SCA Expo that year.
Okay.
And we were hanging out at Expo, and then the three of us kind of got together and went to Portland, Oregon to see like what's going on down there.
Oh, yeah.
And just had a really good time, and that was it. We stayed in touch. She came back to Costa Rica, and she was kind of working on a project, helping obviously her father, and at this point also some of their neighbors in Tarrazú export coffee, and so she was kind of getting started with exporting a little bit. And I was, just barista for hire, like freelance barista, doing some consulting. And this was during a time, obviously, that a lot of coffee companies were starting. It was getting pretty popular. People were starting roasteries and opening up coffee shops. And by that time, I had a little name for myself in Arizona, so people were hiring me to help them start their business. And so I was kind of floating around. Oh, I also did a little project called Coffee Scene. So I got in my truck. I built in the back of the truck like a little sleeping room. So I got in my truck and I took my friend Shantae, who was a videographer. And we both got in the truck and went across the United States, and we would just stop in every major city and just go to all the coffee shops that we thought like looked specialty on Google, and we just came in and we said, hey, we're Perry and Shantae, and we're filming this project called Coffee Scene. Can we interview you? And most people, I think maybe one or two said, no, I'm not comfortable with that, but most people there on the spot were just like, yeah, sure. And so I did Coffee Scene, and I met a lot of really nice people that way.
That's nice.
A lot of people that are buying Costa Rican coffee from us now.
It's still available.
It's all on YouTube, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's called Coffee Scene. Check it out. It's, it's all United States, but maybe one day I'll do like what are those guys called? European coffee trip or something. They're also doing a very good job.
You can Costa Rican Europe.
Big fan of their work.
Hi to Bruno.
Yeah, hello.
They'll be happy that you know them.
Of course.
Nice.
Of course. Big inspiration. I think they were starting about the same time that I was doing Coffee Scene, or maybe a little bit after. But very good stuff. And then what happened? Then I came back the year after that again, probably looking for coffee to compete with. And Nella obviously was here this time.
Okay.
And she was with Morton from Nordic Approach, who also was visiting to start a project together with Nella, that they were going to be buying a good amount of coffee from Costa Rica. And they were getting started, and it was a really good time. Learned just a lot of stuff, and it was really the beginning of a lot of things. Like, I feel like on that trip, Nella and I started getting a little bit more romantic. Yeah, probably a little bit thanks to Morton, because he got everybody drunk one night, and the rest is history. Sometimes you need, you know, Czech Republic is the same. You need a little
like for it's a
lubrication, you know.
Lubrication of
Yeah.
love.
So yeah, so we kind of started getting romantic there, and I went back home, and Ella and I stayed in touch. She was very busy with the new project, and it was, yeah, it's pretty cool.
The romance of modern man.
Yeah.
You are just looking for a shadow to sneak peek your dates into.
That's right. And so, but it was tough, you know, long distance. It's not easy. And I competed again. Didn't do good again. I think I went over time, and you know, my focus in the competition, I don't think was, if you want to do well in competition, my focus wasn't good, because my focus was more on the story, what's behind the coffee, what goes into the coffee, and I wasn't focusing on like the points and it needs to taste like this and smell like this, and you know what I mean? Like, I feel like if you want to do well, you have to play to the score sheet, you know?
Yeah, just score sheet.
And I was in a totally different world of like, oh, I'm on stage and people are looking at me and I need to really say like everything I know about this coffee. But I think the trick to competition is follow the score sheet, do good on the score sheet, and if you do well in the competition, then people will find what's the story behind the coffee.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I feel like the competition is not so great, because yeah, you're just like trying to fill out a piece of paper rather than really going and talking about the people that made it and where the coffee's from and everything like that. But yeah, time went on, and Ella and I like were getting more and more serious, kind of from a distance, and it got to a point where it's like, all right, what are we doing? Like, are you coming here? Am I going there? And it made the most sense to us that I try and come to Costa Rica. So that's like a whole another story, because there was, you know, drama, and it was tough. You know? It was not easy to come over here and live. Obviously, I didn't speak the language.
Yes.
Totally different culture, and there was a lot of obstacles. The long story short, I came down here, worked as a barista in Barrio Escalante in San Jose, in the capital. I started working with my very good friend Juan Garcia. He had a place called the Underground Brew Cafe.
Okay.
So it was like a little bar tucked away there in Barrio Escalante. One of the first like specialty coffee shops in that area. And actually, Yanichi, he worked there a little bit as well before Juan decided to close the doors. But yeah, a very special place in my heart, both Juan and that coffee bar. And yeah, there is like where I learned a lot of Spanish, made a lot of friends in the city, and yeah, just kind of found my framework, and then our friends Sidvar and Brandon opened Franco, somebody Escalante, and I wanted to help them because, you know, they were just starting and they were looking for good baristas, and to be honest, it's not so easy to find, you know, top-notch, high-level baristas here. It's changing, and there's a lot of education and like options to, you know, get educated, but I think at that time it was hard to really find people with experience in a high volume, high level cafe. And so yeah, I wanted to help out my friends, so I kind of started working half and half with Underground and with Franco. And eventually I went all the way with Franco because it was just like a big operation. They really needed a lot of help, and yeah, so. I think Franco is one of the few places in Costa Rica that you can go, and it's like on that level of like, you know, on that level of any coffee place in Paris or Manhattan or Los Angeles or San Francisco or whatever big city. So we're very great, you know, we're very thankful to have them around, because otherwise I think things would be pretty rough around here in terms of specialty coffee. But yeah, so I was doing that, and people that I made connections with in the States when I was just a barista and a roaster and a consultant, they start asking me like, hey, what's happening down there? We see you're in Costa Rica and you're a barista and you're visiting farms and stuff like that, and people were interested in what was happening, and so we started sending samples. People like the coffee, and people want to buy the coffee, and okay, how do we get it to you? And then you start to learn how to work the logistics of everything, and yeah, I started doing exports. I think it was the harvest of 2018. I did my first export of like, I think it was maybe 100 bags, something like that. And yeah, Mela also was doing her thing, working with a lot of farmers, and everything was going very good.
It was still like you was connected with your friends, and she was like working for Nordic project.
Yeah, so at that time, Nordic has like projects at Origin called Tropic. So she was like the country manager for Costa Rica for Tropic.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah, Nordic Approach was doing most of the importing for Tropic. And yeah, I think things were going pretty well. And I think they were doing a really good job, you know, like finding some really nice coffees, supporting a lot of different farmers, and connecting farmers with some really great roasters and importers. So honestly, nothing but good things to say about the whole team there and the whole project. And I think I thought it was looking good for everybody.
Yeah.
And I was happy, you know, like baristaing and sending some coffees to the United States with friends that were asking me for coffee. And yeah, but time went on, and at some point Nordic Approach decided to leave Costa Rica, that it wasn't for them, and so we had to figure out what to do, because now Nella had a bunch of these farmers that had coffee that needed to sell it, so it was a little bit of a stressful time.
Yeah.
But I said, look what I'm doing. Like, people are asking me for coffee. I send them samples. They seem to usually like it, and all good. So don't worry. Like, let's do it. Maybe let's join forces and see if we can do it ourselves. And we did, and it was a big hit, big success, kind of beyond our expectations.
Okay. But still, you needed like a lot of investment from start to like have a lot of things secured, or it was just like stress to, you know, in that way.
It's stress to place the coffees, because you don't, you know, like, let's say, you know, the idea always with a producer and with a roaster is that once there's a rapport there, you know, the roaster likes the coffee, the farmer is happy with the way, you know, that things are working. The idea is to do every year kind of the same, and maybe trying to grow a little bit. So it's like, okay, if I bought from X producer 10 bags last year, and then this year they're like kind of hoping that I buy that same 10 bags. But then I tell them, you know, in the middle of the harvest or at the end of the harvest, well, I might not take this 10 bags then. You know, they might be worried that this coffee is not going to sell. What are they going to do with it? Now they need to do more work and offer the coffee to a bunch of people. So we're more worried about the farmers because obviously for us, like, you know,
in the middle.
We either get a job or I don't know, we didn't really have much to lose besides reputation. So yeah, we just kind of started putting things together and it went well. Like the farmers didn't get stuck with coffee. And so we were happy just to help the farmers move their coffee, and some of the roasters, you know, were obviously wanted to continue their relationships. And that's kind of how Selva started. And then slowly, you know, we kind of kept those relationships and built on some of them, and started to get some new ones. So it's been really great. I think everybody's happy, and as long as the roasters are happy with our service and the product and the relationship, we try and give them as much information as we can, be as transparent as we can. And so I think they're happy with what we're doing, and so are the farmers. I think the farmers are happy to know where their coffees end up going. They like to be in touch with the people that are serving their coffee in another part of the world, and the consuming side. And I think we're paying pretty good prices for the farmers, which is another big goal. Because, you know, part of the reason that people started doing wet mills and processing their own coffee and getting into the specialty market is because they need more income. That selling the fruit just wasn't enough, not sustainable in the long run. And so our goal has always been to kind of use that to our advantage. You know, these people that start wet mills and are doing micro lots and moving into the specialty coffee industry, that helps us pay better prices, that helps us get better quality, that helps traceability, because now it's not, oh, everybody brings their fruit and we do a big mix and we sell a big container of coffee. No, now it's like, you know, all these little wet mills are processing their own little farms and doing different processes, so you can really like know exactly what's going on with each micro lot. And so that's what makes Costa Rica really special, and that's what's been able, you know, that's what's helped Selva be able to do what we do. So I think it's unique to Costa Rica, and we're glad to be a part of it.
But as you say, you started 2018, like from
my first export that I ever did was 2018, which I always call a harvest from one year. A lot of people say like 17, 18, because usually the harvest starts at the end of 1 year and then goes into the beginning of another. But for me, I always say like 1 year, because most of the harvest is in the beginning of the year, especially in Tarasu. Like it usually starts like in the beginning of the year, and then the exports happen that year, and then the roasters are releasing the coffee that year. So I don't usually say 17, 18 or 18, 19. I just say 2018 was.
So actually Selva started like your whole career is through COVID of the Selva, because
so COVID started in our
first year, because it's the 2020.
No, because so my first export, which I guess is kind of where Selva started, was 2018. Then 2019 was the first year that was like me and Nella together.
Yeah.
And then 2020 was when it started. But it started like kind of in the middle of the harvest. Like, we had people visiting. I'll never forget, like, we were in a farm and nobody really like cared at the time about it, you know. It was like kind of this thing happening in China, but it's never gonna like come over here. And I remember we were like out visiting farms, cuppings, having a great time. And it was like, you know, before the pandemic, a lot of people came to Origin. So we had a few groups. Like, we had like 10 people, I feel like. And I remember coming back to Carlos's house one night, and we're all like kind of, looking at our phones, and there's all this news, United States not letting Europe come, and, you know, flights are getting canceled, and it started like all the crazy stuff, like right in the middle of the harvest. And so it was interesting because all of a sudden people were like, you know, that coffee that we wanted to buy, we might not need it because they're closing our coffee shops now. And so it was a crazy time, and that harvest was really extended out. First of all, because the harvest was long, and second of all, people didn't know if they wanted to buy, or you know, the logistics got complicated. And so that year, 2020, I feel like the harvest went all the way until September, October. So it's crazy. And then, so that was our second year, like me and Nella together, which was crazy. And then the next year was complicated because the borders were shut, like Nicaragua and Panama, and that's where most of the harvesters come from. You know, they come help and pick the coffee during the harvest from Panama and Nicaragua, and it was very tough because the farmers didn't know if pickers were going to be able to come. And then sort of last minute, they were able to come, but there was a bunch of new rules that the farmers needed to invest in the housing for them, and, you know, put sinks and keep all the families in their own bubbles and do quarantines and testing, and they had to send buses to the border to pick them up and take them back home. So basically it became a big headache and a big investment or big cost for the farmers. But I guess it was better than, you know, a lot of the farmers before that harvest, they were thinking that a lot of the fruit was just going to fall to the ground and they would lose the harvest completely. So every year that we've had Selva has been unique and kind of crazy, but somehow it works out. And I think that's a lot because of the support and the help that we get from our roasters. Everybody's always willing to help, very understanding. They want to help us and farmers and really the community that we've become a part of. Well, Nella's always been a part of, but that I've kind of joined recently.
And is it like you brought like friends, but clients from USA? So mostly the coffee is going there because it's like.
I would say we're pretty strong in the U.S. It's definitely a really strong market for us. But we send coffees all over the world. We do quite well in Europe.
I saw some Saudi.
We have some very, very, very good clients in Saudi Arabia that they roast, and they also recently started an importing company.
Okay.
And that's a pretty crazy market because they like really intense and funky and crazy coffees, which is in a way good for us because I don't think it's easy to find that kind of coffee in a lot of countries. I see obviously Colombia does a lot of crazy processing. Ethiopia is starting a little bit, you know, with anaerobics and stuff like that. But it's still growing. Costa Rica is lucky because usually there's a very like established dry season during the harvest.
Okay.
And so we're very lucky that, you know, 8 times out of 10 it's good. It's really good weather to dry coffee when it's harvest. And so you're able to do a lot of these these crazy processing techniques that I think would be harder in other countries, that maybe it's humid during the harvest or rainy or whatever it may be. So yeah, we really like the Saudi Arabia market because they like our coffees. We also send, where else? We're trying to do a little bit Asia, but it's tricky, not so much.
Okay.
But we have a few little clients in Asia, Australia. I don't think we have anybody at the moment.
Okay.
So if anybody listening from Australia, or if you know anybody in Australia, send them our way.
Good to
Canada, we do quite a bit.
Okay.
A little bit everywhere. We love Europe as well. Europe's has a special place in our heart. But you know, each market has its like little things.
Yeah.
You just need to know how to cater to each market that has different tastes and maybe different ability to pay certain prices, or you know, each market is different. Maybe there's like a certain producer that has a lot of coffee in Europe, so we need to know, oh, okay, this producer, maybe we shouldn't send it to Europe because it's already kind of saturated.
Okay.
You know, so there's a lot of things that you need to take into consideration of like when you're approaching each market.
Never-ending job.
No, it's never ending. And it's a lot of problem solving too, more than anything.
And is it like we if we buy our coffee, we are doing it, or last year it was through Sukafina,
right?
Who was like 3-2 cup before, and
right?
They switched it to like bigger, connected with the whole market. Brand. So that's Europe, but or it's your like worldwide client, or you said like sorry, you now have like the producer, the buyer. So
in Saudi Arabia, our client is the importer.
Yeah.
So they do the importing, and you know, a big part of the importing is finance. When you break everything down.
Actually,
and of course the knowledge and know-how, because you're not going to import coffee with an importer of cars or an importer of oil, or you know, there's so many different commodities and products. So you obviously want to work with an importer that knows about coffee, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and so you need that expertise. But they really help with financing, with paperwork, with stuff that if I'm a roaster, I don't really want to deal with, because I'm a little roaster, I have all these employees. Today the ice machine broke, tomorrow the refrigerator doesn't work, one day I come in and somebody broke the window, so I need to fix the window. You know, it's like you're busy doing other stuff. So your job is to like maintain the relationship, evaluate the samples, know what you need, know what you want, try and plan ahead, because especially with us, there's a lot of planning, because the harvest is happening January, February, but you're not going to get the coffee until July or August. So that's your job, and then we leave it up to the importers and us to figure out how to get it inside Europe, take it out of the container, put it in the warehouse, make sure all the farmers are paid on time, make sure the roasters have time to pay, you know, pull the coffee. So yeah, you need importing partners, and Sukafina is definitely a really close relationship that we have. I think they do a really great job, really good service, you know, they're competitive on the pricing. And we've heard nothing but good things from the roasters about them. And another cool thing is that sometimes they send us clients too. So You know, we bring clients, sometimes they bring clients, we fill up a container, send it out, and everybody's happy.
That's good. Because my friend who was working, and she's still working for Falcon, she said like, yeah, try direct trade, but you are like picking cherries, and we need to sell all the coffee and buy all the coffee from farmers that they are happy, and if you will buy just few bags, who else will be like buying the rest? So that's why importer is really like necessary, and most of the works and the heavy is dependent on them, because they can like buy all the coffee from the farmers, from you. You have a clean table, and you can say like, wow, good, coffee is gone, we can like start with
the next harvest,
new year plan.
Yeah, no, I definitely have tons of respect for importers, and without them we couldn't operate. So it's pivotal. Like you need the importer. Because we aren't importers, and we're not in the consuming countries. We're focused here in Costa Rica and getting the coffee. But what you bring up is interesting. Like when it comes to, let's call it cherry picking, that I think it's tough, because you know, as a roaster, a lot of people are critiquing you, and usually it's people in the coffee industry, and you know, your clients that usually in specialty coffee, they have a certain expectation, so you want to have all the nice coffees, but I don't think that's fair to a farmer, because I don't know any farmer that produces all 86 plus coffee.
Of course.
You know, most farmers, 20, 30, maybe 40% of their coffee is high grown and crazy processing and crazy varieties and a little bit more expensive, but they also have a bunch of other coffees that are like 84, 85 that they need to sell. And so I always think it's nice when a roaster can do a little bit of both, like buy from a producer their good stuff and their bad stuff. Or if you're buying just good stuff from a producer, at least ask around and say, does this farmer have some not so great coffee? And maybe you find out that they do. And then the question is, are they getting it sold, or do they need help? And so, you know, in some cases, maybe they say, oh, we have a client for this kind of coffee, and you're our client for the good coffee, so everybody's happy. But you might find that a farmer is, all their good coffee is sold, but they're stuck with the not so good coffee. So I think a lot of being a roaster or a coffee buyer in general is asking the right questions, you know, and getting to the bottom of things. You're not going to get in trouble for asking people tough questions. You know, I think you should put importers and exporters and everybody that's handling green coffee, I think you need to ask them tough questions, like what's going on, and see what they answer. So that's one thing with the cherry picking. The other thing that you mentioned to me sounded like spot coffee versus like more direct trade, let's call it. So with spot coffee, I think there's always a time and a place for a spot, because if I'm a roaster, sometimes maybe my planning wasn't perfect. It's very hard to do, and so sometimes you might be in a pinch and you need coffee fast, and you know, there's a lot of coffee that's sitting in a warehouse at market that you can choose from. So I think there's nothing wrong with that, as long as, again, you're doing your research as far as, you know, where did this coffee come from, and stuff like that. You know, hopefully if you buy coffee, it's not just like this blind, like, oh, okay, it's cupping good, the price is good, send it over here. Hopefully there's, at least you do your research on the importer, that they're doing a good job. But yeah, you know, I think in an ideal world, most of the coffee that a roaster would do is like kind of back to back or bought on FOB terms. I think the industry's come a long way that it's possible now to do that. I think there was a time, maybe even 5 years ago, where that wasn't very possible. But in looking at the roasters that we work with, I do see a lot of people starting to work more and more with like, oh, this is my Ethiopia company, and this is my Guatemala company, and this is my Costa Rica, and this is my Brazil, like, you know, having people that are focused in each country. And I think that's great because you're planning with them, they're keeping you updated on what's happening in that country, and I think in an ideal world you can plan and buy all your coffees directly from the origin. But I can't knock on spot coffees because I do think that there's a time and place for them.
That's it. And do you think, you said, and it was like during your storyline that next thing, or maybe the thing it will be most now the part of changing is dry milling, because
that's huge.
It's changing your game. And when we was cupping, you had a few notes. You were saying like, oh, it's same like last year. He should like be focused on this type and maybe work with his dry milling better, or we was talking about improvements in dry milling through last years that you are pushing on farmers to like invest or do the job. So,
well, I think we could do a whole nother podcast on just dry milling, but you know, the farmer is fertilizing the trees and spraying against disease and keeping the farm healthy and young, and it takes a lot of work, the farming part. Then the processing part and drying it and everything. There's a lot of work that goes into the coffee, and there's always going to be imperfections, always. And when it comes time to dry mill, you can make a good coffee and completely ruin it in the dry mill, or you can take a coffee that's so-so and give it a little bit improvement in the dry mill.
Okay.
And so you need to approach it with a lot of care, especially with a lot of these new processing methods, because what happens to the physical green is like you get all these weird colors and weird, you know, it's a weird looking coffee, like these anaerobics and stuff. If you've ever seen it, it's like red and orange, and so the first few years when people were experimenting with these coffees, a lot of these beans were seen as defects, you know, like you put it through the sorting machines and it's taking out a lot of these like sour beans or discolored beans. And so we would have an offer sample on the cupping table that's crazy and fruity and chocolate and whatever you would expect from an anaerobic, and we tell the farmer, yes, we want this coffee, go ahead and dry mill it and we'll export it. And then they bring you what's called the pre-shipment sample, which is the coffee peeled and sorted and ready to export, and it tasted very simple, very, you know, like honey or something. And so we started to find that, oh wow, when you take these funky, crazy coffees to the dry mill, you have to tell the people working the dry mill, look, keep this red bean, keep this yellow bean, keep this brown bean. This is what puts the good flavor in the coffee. Okay. That a couple of years ago was a defect. You know, oh, this is ferment. This is ferment. It's bad. I don't buy it. I cancel it. You know, 5 years ago, people were canceling lots because it was ferment.
Okay.
Now they're asking for you to ferment the crap out of it. So that's one thing. That was over here somewhere. That's one thing. What's another thing with dry milling? Sometimes you have to dry mill a coffee multiple times, so a farmer will bring you the sample and the pre-shipment sample, and you're looking and it's not acceptable. You know, you find too many broken beans, or you find too many partial blacks, or there's Quakers, and you say, no, like the client is not going to accept this, so you need to do another lot, it's like a person. You know, every lot has its own personality, and so there might be a lot of coffee that you just need to pass it through all the machines one time, and it comes out perfect. But then there's some lots that need to be density sorted a little bit more, or some lots that need to be through the color sorter a couple times, or so you really need to get to know the coffee and know what to do in the dry mill to fix problems. And yeah, it's like a whole thing. We've had farmers that they take their coffee to the dry mill, and the dry mill accidentally mixes everything together. And so it's, you know, you can make or break it at the dry mill. The thing with Costa Rica right now is there's very few options for dry milling. And the major one is always full. So if I'm a little farmer and I need to get my 10 bags of coffee dry milled, but everybody else in the country that maybe is doing 1,000 bags is dry milling, I'm out of luck. And so it's complicated. In an ideal world, every wet mill would have their own dry mill, but it's very expensive. And yeah, it's just not that simple. So it's a big topic, and a topic that I hope we start to see more in barista competition and Brewers Cup and all of that. It would be interesting to see somebody present maybe a coffee that wasn't dry milled and then a coffee that was dry milled, or I'm gonna make my espresso with European preparation and I'm gonna make my cappuccino with like American preparation. I think it's an interesting topic I'd like to see discussed more in our industry.
Okay, we are reaching.
We're coming up. Yeah, we're coming up to Fatima now.
Okay. Barry, it's 52 minutes, and I think it's
Plenty.
Beautiful talk, and
I hope I didn't bore anybody.
oh my God.
I hope they're not like skipping across the Spotify, you know?
No, I'm thrilled. I hope you guys there are thrilled. So thank you for
Everybody buy as much candy cane as you can.
But from Costa Rica, of course.
No, from everything.
We need to buy more from Donnelly and Solis and Cordero and from Fatima. So come on, buy it.
Nastravi.
Oh yes, and he knows a lot of Czech names.
Yeah, to everybody, Tomáš, Wojtek,
Of course.
Jan, Janičku,
Janíček some.
Janiček. To all of you guys out there, we're big fans. Come visit.
And buy coffee now. Thank you. Bye.